The two projects involving the operational use of LSD, Third Chance and Derby Hat, were apparently approved by the Army Assistant Chief of Staff for Intelligence, General Willems, on December 7, 1960. Footnote 122. Pausing the reading to read footnote 122. Mahovsky fact sheet, December 9, 60. Resuming the reading. This verbal approval came in the course of a briefing on previous drug programs and on the planned field experimentation. There is no record of written approval being issued by the ACSI to authorize these specific projects until January 1960, and there is no record of any specific knowledge or approval by the Secretary of the Army. On February 4, 1960, Major General C.F. Leonard, Army ACSI, forwarded a copy of the Third Chance Trip Report to Army Chief of Staff General Earl Wheeler. Footnote 23. Wheeler had apparently requested a copy on February 2nd. The report was routed through a General Hamlet. While this report included background on the origins of the LSD tests, it appears that General Wheeler may only have read the conclusion and recommendations. Footnote 124. The office memorandum accompanying the trip report bears Wheeler's initials. Footnote 125. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 123. Memorandum from Leonard to Wheeler, February 4, 63. Footnote 124. SGS Memorandum to Wheeler through Hamlet, February 2nd, 63. Footnote 125. Ibid. Resuming the reading. Subsection 5. Termination of testing. On April 10, 1963, a briefing was held in the ACSI's office on the results of projects Third Chance and Derby Hat. Both SPTs concluded that more field testing was required before LSD could be utilized as an integral aid to counterintelligence interrogations. During the presentation of Derby Hat results, General Leonard, Deputy ACSI, directed that no further field testing be undertaken. Footnote 126. After this meeting, the ACSI sent a letter to the Commanding General of the Army, Combat Developments Command, CDC, requesting that he review Third Chance and Derby Hat and, quote, make a net evaluation concerning the adoption of EA 1729 for future use as an effective and profitable aid in counterintelligence interrogations, end quote. Footnote 127. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 125. Ibid. Footnote 126. Mage F. Barnett, Memorandum for the Record, August 12, 63. Footnote 127. Yamaki Memorandum for the Record, July 16, 63. Resuming the reading. On the same day, the ACSI requested that the CDC commander revise Regulation FM 30-17 to read in part. In no instance will drugs be used as an aid to interrogations in counterintelligence or security operations without prior permission of the Department of the Army. Requests to use drugs as an investigative aid will be forwarded through intelligence channels to the OACSI-DA for approval. Medical research has established that information obtained through the use of these drugs is unreliable and invalid. It is considered that DA, in brackets, Army in brackets, approval must be prerequisite for use of such drugs because of the moral, legal, medical, and political problems inherent in their use for intelligence purposes. Footnote 28. Pausing the reading to read footnote 128. Ibid. End of page 419. Beginning page 420. The subsequent adoption of this regulation marked the effective termination of field testing of LSD by the Army. The official termination date of these testing programs is rather unclear, but a later ACSI memo indicates that it may have occurred in September of 1963. On the 19th of that month, a meeting was held between Dr. Van Sims, Edgewood Arsenal, Major Clovis, Chemical Research Laboratory, and ACSI representatives, General DeHolm and Colonel Schmidt. Quote, as a result of this conference, a determination was made to suspend the program and any further activity pending a more profitable and suitable use. Footnote 129. Pausing the reading to read footnote 129. Undated ASCI Memorandum, page 2. Resuming the reading. Section D. Cooperation and competition among the intelligence community agencies and between these agencies and other individuals and institutions. Subsection 1. Relationships among agencies within the intelligence community. Relationships among intelligence community agencies in this area varied considerably over time, ranging from full cooperation to intense and wasteful competition. The early period was marked by a high degree of cooperation among the agencies of the intelligence community. Although the military dominated research involving chemical and biological agents, the information developed was shared with the FBI and the CIA. But the spirit of cooperation did not continue. The failure by the military to share information apparently breached the spirit, if not the letter of commands from above. As noted above, the Army Assistant Chief of Staff for Intelligence was briefed on the proposed operational testing of LSD under Project Third Chance and expressed concern that the project had not been coordinated with FBI and CIA. Despite this request, no coordination was achieved between the Army and either of these agencies. Had such cooperation been forthcoming, this project may have been evaluated in a different light. The competition between the agencies in this area reached bizarre levels. A military officer told a CIA representative in confidence about the military's field testing of LSD in Europe under Project Third Chance, and the CIA promptly attempted to learn surreptitiously the nature and extent of the program. At roughly the same time, Mr. Helms argued to the DDCI that the unwitting testing program should be continued as it contributed to the CIA's capability in the area and thus allowed the CIA, quote, to restrain others in the intelligence community, such as the Department of Defense, from pursuing operations, end quote. Footnote 130. Pausing the reading to read footnote 130. Memorandum from the DDP to the DCI, November 9, 64, page 2. Resuming the reading. The MK Naomi program was also marked by a failure to share information. The Army Special Forces, the principal customer of the Special Operations Division at Fort Detrick, and the CIA, rather than attempting to coordinate their efforts, promulgated different requirements which varied only slightly. This apparently resulted in some duplication of effort. In order to ensure the security of CIA operations, the agency would request materials from SOD for operational use without fully or accurately describing the operational requirements. This resulted in limitations on SOD's ability to assist the CIA. End of page 420. Beginning page 421. Subsection 2. Relationships between the intelligence community and the intelligence community agencies and foreign liaison services. The subjects of the CIA's operational testing of chemical and biological agents abroad were generally being held for interrogation by foreign intelligence or security organizations. Although information about the use of drugs was generally withheld from these organizations, cooperation with them necessarily jeopardized the security of CIA interest in these materials. Cooperation also placed the American government in a position of complicity in actions which violated the rights of the subjects, and which may have violated the laws of the country in which these experiments took place. Cooperation between the intelligence agencies and organizations in foreign countries was not limited to relationships with intelligence or internal security organizations. Some MK-Ultra research was conducted abroad. While this is in itself not a questionable practice, it is important that such research abroad not be undertaken to evade American laws. That this was a possibility is suggested by an artichoke memorandum in which it is noted that working with the scientists of a foreign country, quote, might be very advantageous, end quote, since that government, quote, permitted certain activities which were not permitted by the United States government, i.e. experiments on anthrax, etc., end quote. Footnote 131. Pausing the reading to read footnote 131. Artichoke Memorandum, June 13, 52. Resuming the reading. Subsection 3. The relationships between the intelligence community agencies and other agencies of the U.S. government. Certain U.S. government agencies actively assisted the efforts of intelligence agencies in this area. One form of assistance was to provide, quote, cover, end quote, for research contracts led by intelligence agencies in order to disguise intelligence community interest in chemical and biological agents. Other forms of assistance raise more serious questions. Although the CIA's project involving the surreptitious administration of LSD was conducted by Bureau of Narcotics personnel, there was no open connection between the Bureau personnel and the agency. The Bureau was serving as a, quote, cutout, end quote, in order to make it difficult to trace agency participation. The cutout arrangement, however, reduced the CIA's ability to control the program. The agency could not control the process by which subjects were selected and cultivated, and could not regulate follow-up after the testing. Moreover, as the CIA's Inspector General noted, quote, the handling of test subjects in the last analysis rests with the, quote, in brackets, Bureau of Narcotics, end brackets, agent, working alone. Suppression of the knowledge of critical results from the top CIA management is an inherent risk in these operations, end quote. Footnote 132. Pausing the reading to read footnote 132. IG Report on MK-Ultra, 1963, page 14. Resuming the reading. The arrangement also made it impossible for the agency to be certain that the decision to end the surreptitious administration of LSD would be honored by the Bureau personnel. The arrangement with the Bureau of Narcotics was described as, quote, informal, end quote. Footnote 133. Pausing the reading to read footnote 133. Ibid. This was taken by one agency official to mean that there would be no written contract and no formal mechanism for payment. Elder, December 1875, page 31. Resuming the reading. The informality of the arrangement compounded the problem. Is aggravated by the fact that the 40 Committee has had apparent. End of page 421, beginning page 422. Unwillingness on the part of the Bureau's leadership to ask for details, and the CIA's hesitation in volunteering information. These problems raise serious questions of command and control within the Bureau. Subsection 4. Relationships between the intelligence community, agencies, and other institutions and individuals, public and private. The Inspector General's 1963 survey of MKUltra noted that, quote, the research and development, end quote, phase was conducted through standing arrangements with, quote, specialists in universities, pharmaceutical houses, hospitals, state and federal institutions, private and private research organizations, end quote, in a manner which concealed, quote, from the institution the interests of the CIA, end quote. Only a few, quote, key individuals, end quote, and each institution were, quote, made witting of agency sponsorship, end quote. The research and development phase was succeeded by a phase involving, quote, physicians, toxicologists, and other specialists in mental, narcotics, and general hospitals and prisons, who are provided the products and findings of the basic research projects and proceed with intensive testing on human subjects, end quote. Footnote 134. Pausing the reading to read footnote 134. Ibid, page 9. Resuming the reading. According to the Inspector General, the MKUltra testing program were, quote, conducted under accepted scientific procedures where health permits test subjects are voluntary participants in the program, end quote. Footnote 135. Pausing the reading to read footnote 135. Ibid, page 10. Resuming the reading. This was clearly not true in the project involving the surreptitious administration of LSD, which was marked by a complete lack of screening, medical supervision, opportunity to observe, or medical or psychological follow-up. The intelligence agencies allowed individual researchers to design their project. Experiments sponsored by these researchers, which included one where narcotics addicts were sent to Lexington, Kentucky, who were rewarded with the drug of their addiction in return for participation in experiments with LSD, call into question the decision by the agencies not to fix guidelines for the experiments. The MKUltra Research and Development Program raises other questions as well. It is not clear whether individuals in prisons, mental, narcotics, and general hospitals can provide, quote, informed consent, end quote, to participation in experiments such as these. There is doubt as to whether institutions should be unwitting of the ultimate sponsor of research being done in their facilities. The nature of the arrangements also made it impossible for the individuals who were not aware of the sponsor of the research to exercise any choice about their participation based on the sponsoring organization. Although greater precautions are now being taken in research conducted on behalf of the intelligence community agencies, the dilemma of classification remains. These agencies obviously wish to conceal their interest in certain forms of research, and in order to avoid stimulating interest in the same areas by hostile governments. In some cases today, contractors or researchers wish to conceal their connection with these agencies. Yet the fact of classification prevents open discussion and debate upon which scholarly work depends. End of page 422. Beginning page 423. Chapter 18. Summary. Findings and Recommendations. Subsection A. Introduction. Or Section A. Introduction. The purpose of the Senate Select Committee's inquiry into the intelligence activities of the United States has been to determine what secret governmental activities are necessary and how they best can be conducted under the rule of law. There is unquestioned need to build a new consensus between the executive and legislative branches concerning the proper scope and purpose of foreign and military intelligence activities. Allegations of abuse, revelations in the press, and the results of the committee's 15-month inquiry have underlined the necessity to restore confidence in the integrity of our nation's intelligence agencies. The findings and recommendations which follow are presented in that spirit. They are, in essence, an agenda for remedial action by both the legislative and executive branches of the United States government. There is an urgency to completing this schedule of action. This task is no less important to safeguarding America's future than our intelligence activities themselves. The committee's investigation and the body of its report seek within the limits of prudence to perform the crucial task of informing the American people concerning the nature and scope of their government's foreign and intelligence activities. The fundamental issue faced by the committee in its investigation was how the requirements of American democracy can be properly balanced in intelligence matters against the need for secrecy. Secrecy is essential for the success of many important intelligence activities. At the same time, secrecy contributed to many of the abuses, excesses, and inefficiencies uncovered by the committee. Secrecy also makes it difficult to establish a public consensus for the future conduct of certain intelligence operations. Because of secrecy, the committee initially had difficulty gaining access to executive branch information required to carry out the investigation. It was not until the committee became responsible for investigating allegations of assassination plots that many of the obstacles were cleared away. The resulting access by the committee was in some cases unprecedented, but the committee's access to documents and records was hampered nonetheless in a number of other instances, either because the materials did not exist or because the executive branch was unwilling to make them available. Secrecy was also a major issue in preparing this report. In order to safeguard what are now agreed to be necessary intelligence activities, the committee decided not to reveal publicly the full and complete picture of the intelligence operations of the United States government. The recommendations as a whole have not been materially affected by the requirements of secrecy, but some important findings of the committee must remain classified in accordance with the committee's policy of protecting valid secrets. In this connection, it should be noted, end of page 423, beginning page 424, that some information which, in the committee's opinion, the American public should know remains classified and has been excluded from the report at the request of the intelligence community agencies. Only the Senate will receive the full version of the committee's final report in accordance with the standing rules of the Senate. In trying to reconcile the requirements of secrecy and open democratic processes, the committee found itself with a difficult dilemma. As an investigating committee, it cannot take affirmative legislative action respecting some of the matters that came to its attention. On the other hand, because of necessary secrecy, the committee cannot publicly present the full case as to why its recommendations are essential. This experience underscores the need for an effective legislative oversight committee which has sufficient power to resolve such fundamental conflicts between between secrecy and democracy. As stated previously, it is the committee's view that effective congressional oversight requires the power to authorize the budgets of the national intelligence agencies. Without such authority, an oversight committee may find itself in possession of important secret information, but unable to act effectively to protect the principles, integrity, and reputation of the United States. The findings and recommendations which follow are organized principally by agency. There are, however, common themes in recommendations which cut across agency lines. Some of these themes are guarding against abuse of America's institutions and reputation, ensuring clear accountability for clandestine activities, establishing effective management of intelligence activities, and creating a framework of statutory law and congressional oversight for the agencies and the activities of the United States intelligence community. The committee's recommendations fall into three categories. 1. Recommendations that the committee believes should be embodied in law. 2. Recommendations to the executive branch concerning principles, practices, and policies which the committee believes should be pursued within the executive's sphere of responsibilities. And 3. Recommendations which should be taken into account by executive branch in its relations with the intelligence oversight committees of Congress. Section B. General findings. The committee finds that the United States foreign and military intelligence agencies have made important contributions to the nation's security and generally have performed their mission with dedication and distinction. The committee further finds that the individual men and women serving America in difficult and dangerous intelligence assignments deserve the respect and gratitude of the nation. The committee finds that there is a continuing need for an effective system of foreign and military intelligence. The United States interests and responsibilities in the world will be challenged for the foreseeable future by strong and potentially hostile powers. This requires the maintenance of an effective American intelligence system. The committee has found that the Soviet KGB and other hostile intelligence services maintain extensive foreign intelligence operations for both intelligence collection and covert operational purposes. These, end of page 424, beginning page 425. Activities pose a threat to the intelligence activities and interests of the United States and its allies. The committee finds that the Congress has failed to provide the necessary statutory guidelines to ensure that intelligence agencies carry out their missions in accord with constitutional processes. Mechanisms for and the practice of congressional oversight have not been adequate. Further, Congress has not devised appropriate means to effectively use the valuable information developed by the intelligence agencies. Intelligence information and analysis that exist within the executive branch clearly would contribute to sound judgments and more effective legislation in the areas of foreign policy and national security. The committee finds that the covert action operations have not been an exceptional instrument used only in rare instances when the vital interests of the United States have been at stake. On the contrary, presidents and administrations have made excessive and at times self-defeating use of covert action. In addition, covert action has become a routine program with a bureaucratic momentum of its own. The long-term impact at home and abroad, of repeated disclosure of U.S. covert action never appears to have been assessed. The cumulative effect of covert actions have been increasingly costly to America's interest and reputation. The committee believes that covert action must be employed only in the most extraordinary circumstances. Although there is a question concerning the extent to which the Constitution requires publication of intelligence and expenditures information, the committee finds that the Constitution at least requires public disclosure and public authorization of an annual aggregate figure for the United States national intelligence activities. Congress's failure as a whole to monitor the intelligence agency's expenditures has been a major element in the ineffective legislative oversight of the intelligence community. The Permanent Intelligence Oversight Committee of Congress should give further consideration to the question of the extent to which further public disclosure of intelligence budget information is prudent and constitutionally necessary. At the same time, the committee finds that the operation of an extensive and necessary secret intelligence system places severe strains on the nation's constitutional government. The committee is convinced, however, that the competing demands of secrecy and the requirements of the democratic process, our Constitution, and our laws can be reconciled. The need to protect secrets must be balanced with the assurance that secrecy is not used as a means to hide the abuse of power or the failures and mistakes of policy. Means must and can be provided for lawful disclosure of unneeded or unlawful secrets. The committee finds that the intelligence activities should not be regarded as ends in themselves. Rather, the nation's intelligence functions should be organized and directed to assure that they serve the needs of those in the executive and legislative branches who have responsibility for formulating or carrying out foreign and national security policy. The committee finds that Congress has failed to provide the necessary statutory guidelines to ensure that intelligence agencies carry out their necessary missions in accordance with constitutional processes. End of page 425. Beginning page 426. In order to provide firm direction for the intelligence agencies, the committee finds that new statutory charters for these agencies must be written that take account of the experience of the past 3.5 decades. Further, the committee finds that the relationship among the various intelligence agencies and between them, the Director of Central Intelligence, should be restructured in order to achieve better accountability, coordination, and efficient use of resources. These tasks are urgent. They should be undertaken by the Congress in consultation with the executive branch in the coming year. The recent proposals and executive actions by the President are most welcome. Footnote 1. However, further action by Congress is necessary. Pausing the reading to read footnote 1. Executive Order 11905, February 1876. Resuming the reading. Section C. The 1947 National Security Act and related legislation. The National Security Act of 1947, footnote 2, is no longer an adequate framework for the conduct of America's intelligence activities. Pausing the reading to read footnote 2. 50 U.S.C. 401 et sec. Resuming the reading. The 1947 Act, preoccupied as it was with the question of military unification, failed to provide an adequate statement of the broad policy and purposes to be served by America's intelligence effort. The committee found that the 1947 Act constitutes a vague and open-ended statement of authority for the President through the National Security Council. Neither espionage, covert action, nor paramilitary warfare is explicitly authorized by the 1947 Act. Nonetheless, these have come to be major activities conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, operating at the direction of the President through the National Security Council. In contrast, the 1947 Act's specific charge to the Director of Central Intelligence, DCI, to coordinate national intelligence has not been effectively realized. In addition to this broad concern, the committee found that the 1947 Act does not provide an adequate charter for the Central Intelligence Agency. Moreover, no statutory charter exists for other key intelligence agencies, the National Security Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency, nor does the Act create an overall structure for intelligence which ensures effective accountability and management control and legislative and executive oversight. Finally, the 1947 Act fails to establish clear and specific limits on the operation of America's intelligence organizations, which will help ensure the protection of the rights and liberties of Americans under the Constitution and the preservation of America's honor and reputation abroad. The need for such limits is a need for legislation. The need is not satisfied by the President's recent proposals and executive order. Recommendations. Footnote 3. Pausing the reading to read footnote 3. See recommendations on this subject in the committee's report on intelligence activities and the rights of Americans. Resuming the reading. Subsection 1. The National Security Act should be recast by omnibus legislation which would set forth the basic purposes of national intelligence activities and define the relationship between the Congress and the intelligence agencies of the executive branch. This revision should be given the highest priority by the intelligence oversight committees of Congress, acting in consultation with the executive branch. End of page 426. Beginning page 427. 2. The new legislation should define the charter of the organizations and entities in the United States intelligence community. It should establish charters for the National Security Council, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Central Intelligence Agency, the national intelligence components of the Department of Defense, including the National Security Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency, and all other elements of the intelligence community, including joint organizations of 2 or more agencies. 3. This legislation should set forth the general structure and procedures of the intelligence community and the roles and responsibilities of the agencies which comprise it. 4. The legislation should contain specific and clear defined prohibitions or limitations on various activities carried out by their respective components of the intelligence community. Section D. The National Security Council and the Office of the President. The National Security Council, NSC, is an instrument of the President and not a corporate entity with authority of its own. The committee found that in general, the President has had, through the National Security Council, effective means for exerting broad policy control over at least 2 major clandestine activities: covert action, footnote 4, and sensitive technical collection. The covert American involvement in Angola and the operations of the Glomar Explorer are examples of that control in quite different circumstances. Whatever conclusions one draws about the merits of the activities, the Central Intelligence Agency, in broad terms, is not, quote, out of control, end quote. The committee found, however, that there were significant limits to this control. Subsection 1. Clandestine activities. The degree of control and accountability exercised regarding covert action and sensitive collection has been a function of each particular president's willingness to use these techniques. The principal NSC vehicle for dealing with clandestine activities, the 40 Committee and its predecessors, was the mechanism for reviewing and making recommendations regarding the approval of major covert action projects. However, this body also served generally to insulate the president from official involvement and accountability in the approval process until 1974. Footnote 5. Pausing the reading to read the footnotes. Footnote 4. See definition, page 141. Footnote 5. Appendix D. Senate Select Committee Hearings, Volume 7, page 230. In 1974, the Hughes-Ryan Amendment, 22 U.S.C. 2422, Section 662, was enacted. It provides that no funds appropriated under the Foreign Assistance Act or any other act may be expended by or on behalf of CIA foreign operations, other than for obtaining necessary intelligence, quote, unless and until the President finds that each such operation is important to the national security of the United States, and reports in a timely fashion a description and scope of such operation to the appropriate committees of the Congress, end quote. Resuming the reading. As high-level government officials, 40 committee members had neither the time nor inclination to adequately review and pass judgment on all of the literally hundreds of covert action projects. Indeed, only a small fraction of such projects, those which the CIA regards as major or sensitive, are so approved and or reviewed. This. End of page 427, beginning page 428. Problem is aggravated by the fact that the 40 Committee has had virtually no staff, with only a single officer from the clandestine services acting as executive secretary. The process of review and approval has been at times only general in nature. It sometimes has become pro forma, conducted over the telephone by subordinates. The President, without consulting any NSC mechanism, can exercise personal direction of clandestine activities, as he did in the case of Chile in 1970. There is no systematic White House level review of either sensitive foreign espionage or counterintelligence activities. Yet these operations may also have a potential for embarrassing the United States, and sometimes may be difficult to distinguish from covert action operations. For example, a proposal to recruit a high foreign government official as an intelligence, quote, asset, end quote, would not necessarily be reviewed outside the Central Intelligence Agency at the NSC level, despite the implications that recruitment might pose in conducting American foreign relations. Similarly, counterintelligence operations might be conducted without any prior review at the highest government levels. The committee found instances in the case of Chile when counterintelligence operations were related to, and even hard to distinguish from, the program of covert action. The President's proposals to upgrade the 40 Committee into the Operations Advisory Group and to give explicit recognition to its role in advising the President on covert activities are desirable. That upgrading, however, will strain further the group's ability to conduct a systematic review of sensitive clandestine operations. Under the new structure, the government members are cabinet officers who have even less time than their principal deputies, who previously conducted the 40 Committee's work. The group's procedures must must be carefully structured so that the perspective of cabinet officers can in fact be brought to bear. Subsection 2. Counterintelligence. There is no NSC level mechanism for coordinating, reviewing, or approving counterintelligence activities in the United States, even those directed at United States citizens, despite the demonstrated potential for abuse. Both the FBI and the CIA are engaged in counterintelligence, with the CIA operating primarily abroad. The committee found frictions between the two agencies over the last 35 years. The so-called Huston Plan, discredited because of its extensive scope and patent illegalities, was justified in part as a response to the need for improved CIA-FBI coordination. At the same time, the Huston Plan episode illustrates the questions of propriety and legality which may arise in counterintelligence operations conducted in the United States or involving American citizens. Subsection 3. Coordination and resource allocation. The Director of Central Intelligence has been assigned the function of coordinating the activities of the intelligence community, ensuring its responsiveness to the requirements for national intelligence, and for assembling a consolidated national intelligence budget. Until the recent establishment of the Committee on Foreign Intelligence, CFI, there was no effective NSC level mechanism for any of these purposes. The committee believes that this CFI is a step in the right direction and is to be commended. However, the language of the presidential, end of page 428, beginning page 429, order is such that much will depend on how the order is in fact implemented. Quote, manage, end quote, and quote, coordinate, end quote, are terms that are general in nature and have proven to be so in matters of intelligence. Because the CFI was formed only recently, questions remain about its operation and its relation to the DCI's current responsibilities to the existing authority of the Secretary of Defense. Moreover, the committee notes that a major collector and consumer of intelligence information, the Department of State, is not represented on the CFI. It should be. Other agencies with an important stake in intelligence, such as the Department of the Treasury, the Energy Resources Development Administration, and the Arms Control and Disarmament Agency, should play an appropriate role in the CFI on an ad hoc basis. Subsection 4. Executive Oversight. The committee finds that presidents have not established specific instruments of oversight to prevent abuses by the intelligence community. In essence, presidents have not exercised effective oversight. The President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, PFIAB, or PFIAB, has served presidents as a useful, quote, kitchen cabinet, end quote, for intelligence and related matters. It has carried out studies that have resulted in useful changes in procedure and emphasis within the intelligence community, as well as in the adoption of new technologies and techniques. At the same time, the committee has found that any expectations that PFIAB would serve as an independent watchdog have been mistaken. The PFIAB has been given neither statutory nor presidential authority to serve a function. For instance, when the board became aware of the Huston Plan, it asked the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI for a copy of the plan. That request was refused, and the board did not pursue the matter with the White House. The committee finds the President's recent establishment of the Intelligence Oversight Board to be long overdue. In the committee's opinion, however, this does not eliminate the need for vigorous congressional oversight. Moreover, the order is broadly phased and at some points ambiguous. The effectiveness of the Oversight Board, as well as the rest of the President's reforms, will depend in large measure on the details of their implementation. The committee makes the following recommendations concerning the National Security Council and the Office of the President. These recommendations are designed to support and extend the measures taken recently by the President. Recommendations. 5. By statute, the National Security Council should be explicitly empowered to direct and provide policy guidance for the intelligence activities of the United States, including intelligence collection, counterintelligence, and conduct of covert action. 6. By statute, the Attorney General should be made an advisor to the National Security Council in order to facilitate discharging his responsibility to ensure that actions taken to protect American national security in the field of intelligence are also consistent with the Constitution and the laws of the United States. 7. By statute, the existing power of the Director of Central Intelligence to coordinate activities of the intelligence community. End of page 429, beginning page 430. Should be reaffirmed. At the same time, the NSC should establish an appropriate committee, such as the new Committee on Foreign Intelligence, with responsibility for intelligence resources to ensure efficient and effective operation of the national intelligence community. This committee should be chaired by the DCI and should include representatives of the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense and the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. Footnote 6. Pausing the reading to read footnote 6. In effect, this recommendation would establish the President's proposed Committee on Foreign Intelligence in law, but would include a representative of the Secretary of State. It would also empower the DCI to establish intelligence requirements. See recommendation number 16, page 434. Resuming the reading. 8. By statute, an NSC committee, like the Operations Advisory Group, should be established to advise the President on covert action. It would also be empowered at the President's discretion to approve all types of sensitive intelligence collection activities. If an OAG member dissented from an approval, the particular collection activity would be referred to the President for decision. The group should consist of the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Attorney General, the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Director of OMB as an observer. The President would designate a chairman from among the group's members. 9. The chairman of the group would be confirmed by the Senate for that position if he were an official not already subject to confirmation. In the execution of covert action and sensitive intelligence collection activities, specifically approved by the President, the chairman would enter the chain of command below the President. 10. The group should be provided with adequate staff to assist in conducting thorough reviews of covert action and sensitive collection projects. That staff should not be drawn exclusively from the clandestine service of the CIA. 11. Each covert action project should be reviewed and passed on by the group. In addition, the group should review all ongoing projects at least once a year. 12. By statute, the Secretary of State should be designated as the principal administration spokesman to the Congress on the policy and purpose underlying covert action projects. 13. By statute, the Director of Central Intelligence should be required to fully inform the Intelligence Oversight Committees of Congress of each covert action. Footnote 7. Prior to its initiation. Pausing the reading to read footnote 7. A covert action would consist of either a major project or an aggregation of smaller projects, meeting the standard of this paragraph. Resuming the reading. No funds should be expended on any covert action unless and until the President certifies and provides to the Congressional Intelligence Oversight Committees the reasons that a covert action is required by extraordinary circumstances to deal with grave threats to the national security of the United States. The Congressional Intelligence Oversight Committees should be kept fully and currently informed on all covert action projects, and the DCI should submit a semi-annual report on all such projects to the committees. 14. The committee recommends that when the Senate establishes an Intelligence Oversight Committee with authority to authorize the national, end of page 430, beginning page 431, intelligence budget, the Hughes-Ryan Amendment, 22 U.S.C. 2422, should be amended so that the foregoing notifications and presidential certifications to the Senate are provided only to that committee. 15. By statute, a new NSC Counterintelligence Committee should be established, consisting of the Attorney General as chairman. The Deputy Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, the Director of the FBI, and the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. Its purpose would be to coordinate and review foreign counterintelligence activities conducted within the United States and the clandestine collection of foreign intelligence within the United States by both the FBI and the CIA. The goal would be to ensure strict conformity with statutory and constitutional requirements and to enhance coordination between the CIA and FBI. Footnote 8. Pausing the reading to read footnote 8. See related legislative proposals in the committee's report on intelligence activities and the rights of Americans. Resuming the reading. This committee should review the standards and guidelines for all recruitments of agents within the United States for counterintelligence or positive foreign intelligence purposes, as well as for the recruitment of U.S. citizens abroad. This committee would consider differences between the agencies concerning their recruitments of agents, the handling of foreign assets who come to the United States, and the establishment of the bona fides of defectors. It should also treat any other foreign intelligence or counterintelligence activity of the FBI and CIA which either agency brings to that forum for presidential level consideration. And under this text, there's a chart. Above the chart or diagram, it says Executive Command and Control / Intelligence Activities. There's 3 boxes from left to right. Intelligence Oversight Board is in the first box. Then connecting to it, you have the President in a second box in the middle. And then to the right of that, you have another box saying Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. And then from the President, there's a line going to another box beneath it, which says National Security Council, underlined, with words in bullet point. First one says Pres, second Vice Pres, third Secretary of State, third Secretary of Defense, and then the fifth one is AG, and then there's a star symbol. Then from that box you have a line which splits into 3, which go to 3 different boxes. The first box on the left says Operations Advisory Group, underlined with bullet points. First one, Secretary of State or Sec State. Second one, Sec Defense or Secretary of Defense. Third one, Assistant to President for National Security Affairs. Fourth one, DCI. Fifth one, Chairman / JCS. Fifth one, Attorney General. Seventh one, Director / OMB Observer. Then from that one, you also have a line which connects it to the middle one, which says Committee on Foreign Intelligence. First bullet says DCI Chair. Second one, Deputy Secretary of Defense, I, or first. Then you got third, Deputy Assistant to President for National Security Affairs. Fourth bullet point, Designated Representative / Secretary of State. Then from there, you have a line which connects to the third box on the far right, which says NSC Counterintelligence Committee, which you have first, Attorney General, Chair. Second one, CIA Director. Third one, Director / FBI. Fourth, Assistant to President for National Security Affairs. And then fifth one, Deputy Secretary of Defense, or DepSec Defense. And then we go back to the Committee on Foreign Intelligence box. From there you have a line connecting to a smaller box which says CFI Spec or Special Committee. And then you've got Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and then DCI. And then underneath you have a star which says Committee Recommendations. And that's the end of page 431, going on to page 432. And here is where I'll stop for this recording.